Welcome to the Engagement Fit Drive podcast. We're so happy to have you join us. And together with Tracy, Andrew, and Claire, let's make bringing your drives to life practical and fun. In our Drives in Action episodes, we'll share stories of drives at play in everyday scenarios, so you can relate and gain deeper understanding of your drives. In our Driving Impact episodes, we'll sit down with incredible guests who are using the Drive framework and tools to create meaningful impact, both professionally and personally. Whether you're here to better understand yourself, your team, or simply curious about living a thriving and inspired life, you're in the right place. So let's dive in.
Welcome back to Drives in Action. We step into the thinking domain, the blue energy of reflecting, reasoning, strategizing, and conceptualizing. These are the drives that help us make sense of complexity. They pause before acting. They bring clarity where others see confusion. They offer perspective that elevates decision-making and long-term direction. As human beings, we are meaning makers. The quality of our thinking shapes how we interpret reality, form beliefs, assign meaning to emotion, and ultimately how we behave. So the discipline is not simply to think, but to steward our thinking well. Each thinking drive carries a distinct contribution. When understood and intentionally aligned, these drives become powerful forces for clarity, coherence, innovation, fairness, and forward movement. But when mismanaged, they can distort perception, weaken judgment, and stall progress. In this episode, we explore 5 thinking drives: Contemplator, Innovator, Integrator, Moderator, and Navigator, how they show up in real life, what they contribute when mastered, and what to watch for when their energy is mismanaged. Let's move from awareness to application.
The first drive is Contemplator. Give me time to think deeply. Driven by a strong need for uninterrupted time alone for deep thinking, reflection, and conceptual understanding, this drive draws energy from solitude and deep thought, exploring multiple perspectives and processing internally before expressing insights. This drive is one of the 2 primary ways that a person processes and makes sense of life and the world around them. This drive achieves this through an internal process, while Articulator does it through verbal expression and thinking out loud. If time alone to process what is happening in one's life is not a priority, it can lead to internal mental turmoil. Contemplator in action engages in deep, unhurried internal thought, sees multiple angles, perspectives, and concepts, and goes beyond surface level interpretation. Watch-outs for this drive is overthinking or becoming slow to act, difficulty verbalizing thoughts before they are fully formed, and withdrawing or disconnected when rushed. The measurable contributions of this drive is it produces well-formed conceptual frameworks, identifies multiple perspectives before decisions are finalized, generates thought-through position papers or strategic reflections, reduces impulsive decisions through structured thinking depth, and elevates the intellectual quality of discussions. And the observable impact of this is fewer reactive decisions, more nuanced strategy, and better long-term clarity. Coaching question for this drive is: what level of clarity do you genuinely need before taking your next step? And how will you recognize when you have enough? This drive is energized by the process of thinking, not necessarily doing anything with the insights from that thinking. And I think that's really key with other people, especially if you've got articulators on your team, because 2 potential issues. One, the articulator will formulate their thinking better as you share insights and clarity from the depth of your thinking. And secondly, If you're making sense of the world based purely on an internal process, where do you get other perspectives? Where do you get other things that challenge your thinking? And what is interesting to note is quite often you will find that with contemplators, the need to communicate their insights is not always something that's forthcoming unless you're aware of it.
Andrew, that awareness, contemplators' primary motivation is to think deeply. That energy is inward and conceptual. For awareness to become application, one of the other dominant drives would influence this application. So, for example, to activate it, if they had initiator, they would be able to activate those thoughts. If they had finisher, they'd be able to execute their thoughts. Or if they had impact player, they would elevate that towards impact. The application would be very much influenced by one of the other dominant drives. If they primarily have a lot of thinking drives, their thinking will be very enriched, very nuanced, but very internal. They would not be able to naturally express or activate their thoughts. And that's just what you said, Andrew. So I think a better way to describe it is awareness becomes application when another dominant drive in that person's profile translates thought into movement, structure, expression, or execution. And without that other dominant drive, the awareness can absolutely remain internal. And that's definitely not a flaw. It's simply how their energy flows. We're going to move on to Innovator. Let's imagine what hasn't been invented yet. So an innovator is driven by the need to think out of the box and stretch beyond conventional boundaries. Their energy comes alive when they are given genuine mental space to explore ideas without immediate pressure to conform or conclude. Innovator energy needs freedom from rigid rules, particularly in the early stages of thinking, as structure too often can suffocate originality. They require permission to challenge assumptions, not as an act of rebellion, but as a way of expanding possibility. Most importantly, they need a safe space to test unconventional thinking without being dismissed or prematurely shut down. When these conditions are present, innovators help organizations reimagine what is possible and unlock solutions others may never have considered. So what does this drive look like in action? You will see they generate original, unconventional ideas. They will disrupt the status quo because of invention or because of change. And they will often ask, what if? And then explore creative possibility. Innovator would ideally need to watch out for ideas without grounding or practicality, constant pivoting to new concepts before execution, frustration when operating within constraints. So their measurable contributions would be they will introduce new ideas, alternatives, or novel approaches. They will challenge outdated assumptions. They will spark creative problem-solving sessions. They will contribute original concepts during ideation phases, and they will drive breakthrough thinking in stagnating environments. That last sentence is so important because having innovators in your organization, you're not going to get left behind. What you will see as an observable impact with the innovator, there will be increased innovation pipeline, new product service concepts, disruption of stagnation. This is a question that they could ask themselves. Which one idea, if fully executed, would create the greatest gift? And what structure do you need around it to protect it from distraction? Because the innovator can have many creative ideas, and because they're energized in this thinking process to get that idea and actually get it landed, I think that coaching question is such a great question to ask themselves.
Trace, what I love about Innovator is, as you were unpacking the awareness part, is the voice of possibility. And I think that's really what it contributes. And there are a number of drives that can play into that lens in terms of This is where we are now, what's possible. And that what's possible question is so valid. But in practice, that generating possibilities, and by the way, just like Contemplator, this drive is energized by the process of ideation, not necessarily doing something with it. When you are formulating ideas or when you are soundboarding ideas, and in the initial stages, make sure that you're not going to get the likes of skeptics poking holes in that ideation process while you're still soundboarding. But definitely as you're moving towards, this is what the type of innovation that we want to execute, then run it past the likes of the skeptics who will test it for implementation. When it comes to implementation of those ideas, there will be other people who protect the space of it's working now, and when we're under pressure, we need trusted, reliable systems. So it's this key about when do you bring innovation in and how do you do that so it doesn't disrupt what's already working?
I'll share my own personal story about this because I am a dominant innovator. And working alone, I can do what I like, when I like, how I like. But working with a team brings a very different dynamic. And I'll give you a great example. This week, I was putting together some slides we have a monthly webinar for all our drive coaches. And I was merrily doing my own thing, bringing my artistic flair, innovating. And I suddenly thought once I'd done it, I think this should be branded. I think this should conform. And I sent it out to get branded. And so innovation is great, but know when to innovate or know when to use your innovation, but enhance it in alignment with the team that you're working with, the organization that you're working with, because it actually works so well together and bringing that alignment. And yeah, I don't crush my innovation by doing it, but I actually felt so great afterwards that now it was like, I'd brought my bit to it, but now it was in alignment with engagement with branding. So for Innovator, awareness will typically look like this. So it's awareness of limitation, which leads to creative reimagining, which leads to a conceptual breakthrough, and then experimentation. So innovators don't sit with awareness to understand it as much as the contemplator. They sit with awareness to rebuild it differently. So application for them is going to look like reframing the problem, designing a new method, replacing the old model, or maybe testing a fresh approach. Their natural instinct is this could be done differently.
Our next drive is Integrator. Let's make sense of the whole. Integrators experience the world around them through a big picture, interconnected, holistic lens that sees systems, relationships, time, and experiences as part of a larger interwoven pattern, which directly shapes and influences how integrators think. Energy is generated by intuitively analyzing complex systems and building understanding across boundaries. Integrators notice patterns and subtle cues that reveal deeper meaning, but translating these intuitive nonlinear insights into clear communication is often the challenge. This drive in action connects patterns, relationships, and systems, sees how things interrelate intuitively, and makes complexity feel coherent and meaningful. The watch-outs for this drive is over-interpreting or sensing patterns that others can't see, feeling misunderstood when intuition isn't validated, and difficulty simplifying without losing nuance. The measurable contribution is they naturally connect siloed information into coherent models. They align strategy across departments. They map interdependencies across systems. They prevent fragmented implementation, and they create big picture clarity in complex environments. The observable impact of this drive in action is improved cross-functional alignment, reduced duplication, and strategic coherence. The question a person could ask with this drive is, how can you express what you're seeing in a way that invites others into the pattern rather than expecting them to see it immediately?
And
Two things I've noticed with this drive is, one, definitely the connections and patterns that I see others won't see. And so when I bring that analysis and then the insights from what I see, how do I language that so that it is meaningful and it does make sense to the people, to the audience who's listening? And then the second thing for me that's been really interesting journey is that holistic big picture lens. It is amazing to me in my thinking how quickly I take something that's linear thinking and then push that out to the big picture and consider the ripple effects of, if this is the case today, what will it look like down the line? And this ability to go to different points in time, backwards and forwards, and how I communicate in language, that I need to be intentional about, because people, as we've already discussed with the time world views in these drive framework, you can lose people just by not bringing context to the time frame that you are referencing when you're connecting these interrelated ideas.
sure, that's deep, Andrew. That's a very valid point. Remembering that it is one of the time-orientated drives, and yes, well, that makes so much sense to me now. In every conversation, are you losing the people around you because you've gone back or forwards, or so that's very interesting. But Andrew, even, you know what, also, as people are listening, is you may have Contemplator dominant and you've got Innovator, or maybe, as we just said, Contemplator and you've got Integrator, and you can start seeing how the dynamics of those two drives working together, where, like you said, Andrew, your non-linear thinking plus the added aspect of the Integrator, where that thinking goes above and beyond in all directions. If you have a really dominant thinking lens, think about the way your drives actually connect and work together and support each other.
So, Trace, what I like about what you've just said with Innovator, and let's just say that you've got booster drives of Integrator, Innovator, and Contemplator. When you can give yourself what's needed for that drive in terms of time and idea and free space to ideate and to deeply think, playing strongly into the Innovator's sort of boundaryless thinking is you start to connect the dots on a framework or a scale that it's not even in other people's frame of reference. That's sometimes where it doesn't mean the interconnections are not there, but how you are languaging and communicating those insights. Just bear in mind that other people might not think in that way. And so where you're getting those interconnections from is completely outside of their frame of reference. You need to back yourself with these insights. Just because other people don't see what you see or how you're connecting things intuitively doesn't mean to say that it's wrong or inaccurate, but you might need to just hold space for that, for timing to play out.
To recap, for Integrator, the primary motivation is to integrate the parts into a whole, and awareness becomes application through connection and coherence. The Integrator senses patterns and interrelationships, then applies insight by aligning moving parts, creating holistic frameworks, bringing unity into fragmentation. The application looks like integration, not action for action's sake. So just putting that in a nutshell.
The next drive is Moderator. Let's create stability and fairness. Driven by a need for operating within clearly communicated expectations, rules, and clear boundaries. Moderators tend to approach situations with diplomacy and naturally work to reduce friction, ensuring people are treated fairly and maintaining environments where there is consistency and clarity, especially under pressure. Because when everyone understands the rules, there's less chance for misalignment or conflict. Moderator in action ensures fair rules, consistent processes, and predictability. They maintain stability within systems and environments, and they act with calm, clinical neutrality. Watchouts could be becoming overly rule-bound or rigid, avoiding necessary tension or conflict, and prioritizing fairness over progress when speed is needed. The measurable contributions: moderators clarify rules, boundaries, and expectations. They ensure fairness and procedural consistency. They reduce ambiguity in policy and governance. They maintain steady operational rhythm, and they stabilize emotionally or politically charged situations. The observable impact of moderators is that they create structural clarity, they reduce volatility, and increased predictability and fairness. Moderators might ask themselves the question, where might maintaining harmony be limiting necessary progress? How can you introduce change without abandoning fairness? Moderator is a strong drive for me, and that fairness component, that thing that everyone should be treated the same, fairly, and equally, is such an overarching way of identifying this in moderators. That fairness component is a big deal. And especially when there is any perceived injustice around how people are being treated that they perceive as unfair, moderator will want to step in and ensure that fairness is observed and create environments where there is harmony and synergy.
One thing with the moderator, and when they see everyone as the same, I think something to add to from their awareness to their application is that there are sometimes extenuating circumstances.
Absolutely.
Why has somebody broken rules? Why have they not done with it? And moderators tend, and when we talk about a drive, we talk about the drive independently. So just moderator, they really struggle to see beyond that. I do try and encourage them to, yes, there must be consequences, but why is the behavior happening?
And I think that's such a great insight, Trace, because especially where there's situations that generate a lot of emotional intensity, the more clinical drives, moderator being one, tend to step up very much in addressing that space from a clinical perspective. And other circumstances or potential issues are not necessarily considered in that space. And that's why it's so great to have the likes of caretakers and other drives that bring that emotional awareness to a situation so that the person is dealt with in a fair way and that the situation is resolved with all the different perspectives that add depth to the situation at play.
That's also so important because under pressure, our dominant drives will get stronger. We
Yes.
will lean more naturally into our dominant drives. So under pressure, a moderator is going to stick more by those rules. Be mindful of how are you applying your drives under pressure.
That's a great insight. And just one final thing around that. Moderators, those policies, procedures, and framework that moderators work in under pressure. If you look at some of the most high pressure teams in the world, special forces teams, military teams, emergency teams, etc. Under pressure, those policies and procedures keep everyone on the same page, and you can execute efficiently and accurately under pressure. And that's the gift of what moderator does bring. And that's why moderators will typically step into that as a way of creating space where everybody's on the same page.
Recap for the moderator. The moderator views situations through the lens of fairness, balance, and clear standards. They instinctively notice when something feels misaligned or inequitable and respond by clarifying expectations, reinforcing agreed rules, and restoring equilibrium. When we talk about the application, it's more with the moderator an influence. So the influence appears measured, steady, and corrective, creating stability through consistency rather than force. Let's move on to Navigator. I'm already 2 steps ahead. A navigator is driven by the need to be 2 steps ahead. Their energy is activated by forward movement and the opportunity to anticipate what is coming next. They naturally scan for future obstacles, risks, and turning points, not out of caution for its own sake, but to ensure smoother progress and prevent avoidable disruption. Navigator energy needs space for strategic foresight, time to think beyond the immediate and consider what lies ahead. It also requires autonomy to adjust direction when necessary, as their contribution often lies in course correcting before problems escalate. When given the mandate to anticipate and prevent obstacles, navigators help create momentum that feels intentional rather than reactive. In action, they are going to be fast. They make fast, proactive decisions in complexity. They anticipate what's coming in next. They look to the horizon, so they are always looking ahead. They move decisively through ambiguity. They do need to watch out for deciding too quickly without enough input. And I want to say that they're leaning forward. So we're already going. To stop navigate, that is quite, my body is in forward motion. So even the physiology is forward and the brain is there too. So they can leave others behind with their pace of thought and assuming others see what they see, dangerous. Their measurable contributions will be that they anticipate obstacles before they emerge, identify downstream consequences of current decisions. They create contingency pathways. They will accelerate decision cycles through forward planning, improve strategic timing, and spot opportunity windows before competitors. Observable impact, fewer surprises, faster pivots, reduced strategic lag, stronger competitive positioning. And this is what I have to ask myself as a navigator. Before you move forward, what does your team need to understand in order to move with you? I think that is so beautiful. That is, asking yourself that question is going to help prevent leaving your team behind. Communication is key with this drive. And understand under pressure, you're not going to communicate every single step. But again, check in with your team. Where are they? Under pressure and in crisis, the slower thinking drives need time. So give them information that they can process then and there. Don't give them too much information. Let them process. Read your team. What is your team? If you're working with drives in your team, you're understanding the benefit of knowing all the drives and knowing your team's drives. I think communication is very key with this drive.
And Trace, just on the communication bit and in terms of the information for the team following, is depth of information and detail. And as you've already mentioned, when you are outmaneuvering obstacles that you are seeing, there isn't necessarily time to do that. The key there in the communication is, what do I need to consider for the people following me? And then maybe afterwards or after the situation, okay, snipers, for example, need specific detailed information on the mission, and skeptic need more detail to analyze risk. That's where the quality of communication can increase as well for the team that's following.
If you are a person that is in a team where there is a dominant navigator, sometimes you assume that that person is just willy-nilly changing direction. So we are hoping to bring understanding that they think so far ahead. It's not that they are just changing direction for no reason. They have already seen obstacles and they pivot. Maybe as in your team, maybe for you to ask more questions if you're not understanding their process.
Yes, actually, very good point. Very good point, because communication's two ways. And maybe for the teams that are a little less change agile and play stronger into detail is to feel comfortable and safe to ask questions, because that might not always be front of mind for a navigator. Navigators naturally are decision makers, and they're independent decision makers. So they tend to make the call and the rest must follow. So really worth considering that in terms of how they show up. But in situations where you do need to pivot fast for whatever reason, incredibly valid and a brilliant contribution, and the speed of thinking is the key as well. Such a gift.
Recap for Navigator. Primary motivation is to be 2 steps ahead. The awareness becomes application through decisive directional movements. Navigator scans the landscape, anticipates outcomes, then selects a path, makes fast decisions, moves forward with clarity. Application looks like forward navigation.
Thanks for joining us on this exciting journey of self-discovery and fulfillment. We hope you found inspiration, practical takeaways, and maybe a deeper understanding of how drives work in action. If you want to discover your drives, head over to engagementfit.com and take the drive assessment. If you loved this episode, remember to hit the subscribe button. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review or share this episode with someone who's ready to unlock their drives and thrive. Until next time, keep driving towards a life of meaningful impact.